The rain whipped across the school courtyard like a leather lash. Caleb laughed loudly, live streaming the scene of Emily sitting quietly, alone. He rushed over, mocking her in front of a cheering crowd. But when Emily lifted her head, her gaze sliced through the noise like a cold blade. In the distance, someone had started to move. That afternoon, the rain poured relentlessly. Heavy droplets pounded the roof of Roosevelt High, blending with the earthy scent of wet soil and old paper. The courtyard was littered with muddy puddles, and squelching shoes echoed down the long, empty hallways. Under the awning, a group of students gathered, laughing and shouting. At the center was Caleb, the most popular student in school, phone always in hand, live streaming everything out of habit. Today, his new target was a stranger. She sat alone at the farthest corner of the courtyard, her slender shoulders trembling slightly beneath an old grey hoodie. In front of her sat a cold lunchbox and a thin, worn-out notebook. Emily was so still, it was as if the world around her didn't exist. Caleb lifted his camera, smirking. "Hey, Roosevelt High's newest cryptid sighting." Laughter erupted behind him. Comments flooded the live stream. "Who's that? New ghost? Kinda cute, like a drowned kitten." Caleb swaggered forward, blocking Emily's view. "Hey, newbie, studying the human species? Or are you lost from another planet?" The crowd roared with laughter. Someone whistled mockingly. Emily slowly lifted her head. Her eyes met Caleb's, calm, steady, without fear or embarrassment. Only a deep, misty sadness. Caleb faltered for a moment. Not because Emily said anything, but her silence made him feel small for the first time. The rain grew heavier, drowning out the fading laughter. Far under the shadow of an old tree, a man stood with his arms crossed, silently watching. A faded denim jacket, a cap pulled low over half his face. Eyes deep and watchful. No one noticed. No one knew that something had shifted that rainy afternoon. Something quiet and irreversible. Emily Norris arrived at Roosevelt High like a soft shadow. No one knew where she came from. At the freshman orientation, she stood quietly behind the crowd, a faded backpack slung low over her shoulder, her oversized hoodie nearly covering her face. Principal Wilson introduced her. "Please welcome Emily Norris, a new transfer student. I hope you'll all help her settle in." Emily gave a slight nod, her pale grey eyes sweeping across the auditorium. Not judgmental, not fearful, just quietly aware, as if she already knew exactly how things would unfold. Whispers rippled through the students. "No Instagram? She's not even on TikTok? Weird. Nowadays, a teenager without a social media presence might as well be a ghost." And to Caleb, who measured life by views and likes, Emily was the perfect material for his next joke. Caleb Morrison wasn't a bad person by nature. He grew up in a world where the crowd's laughter was like oxygen. He was clever, quick-witted, knew how to tell a joke and how to hit just the right note to be adored. At Roosevelt High, Caleb was the unofficial golden boy, captain of the media club, leader of the sports live stream team, a host of school events, and of course the master of harmless pranks that made everyone laugh, even if the victims didn't always smile. Caleb had a rule: never punch down at someone truly weak. But he had never met anyone like Emily. From her very first day in English class, Caleb noticed her, not because she did anything to stand out. On the contrary, because she was so silent, she stood out. She always chose the back corner seat, her gaze fixed on her notebook.
No phone, no laughter. Even when Mr. Anderson cracked a corny old joke that sent the whole class chuckling, Emily stayed silent. Caleb thought, "This girl isolates herself. She's different." And in Caleb's world, anything different had to be tamed or turned into entertainment. Emily Norris didn't want attention. She simply wanted to drift through like a small leaf on a river, leaving the water undisturbed. But she forgot. The calmer the water, the more curious people become about what lies beneath. During lunchtime, when the school buzzed with chatter and laughter, Emily would find the farthest corner of the courtyard. She'd open a simple homemade lunch, a sandwich, a few apple slices, and a water bottle. She ate slowly, nibbling while scribbling notes into her worn notebook. No one knew what she wrote, Darling asked. But to Caleb, that silent image directly challenged the noisy world he thrived in. Chuck Norris arrived at Roosevelt High without fanfare. One September morning, he sat by the school gate in a brand new security uniform. Light blue shirt, khaki pants, a cap pulled low over his face. When students asked, Principal Wilson chuckled, just extra security. There have been some petty car break-ins recently. Nothing to worry about. Chuck barely spoke. He stood there, sometimes walking quiet rounds across the courtyard, his eyes sharp and watchful, like an old eagle. Once, Caleb joked with his friends, if they ever shoot an action movie, that new security guy's ready for casting. But then he forgot about it. But Caleb and his friends, adults, were just part of the scenery. At the world center was Emily, the alien, at Roosevelt High. The rain had stopped by the time Caleb hit upload. His desk lamp glowed against his face, excited and triumphant. The video was only 47 seconds long. Perfect. Short, funny, meme wow. Emily appeared on the screen, sitting quietly under the school's awning. Her gray hoodie was draped over her head, her arms wrapped tightly around a plastic lunchbox. It was a perfect backdrop for Caleb's creativity. He added flashing effects, robotic sounds, and a mocking narration. Which planet sent this strange creature to Roosevelt High? Laughing emojis and mocking GIFs exploded across the screen. Caleb leaned back in his chair, arms behind his head, smiling with satisfaction. He didn't think he'd done anything wrong. In a world where likes and views were the currency of worth, this was just another harmless click. Or at least, that's what Caleb convinced himself to believe. 4 hours after posting, the video had nearly 3,000 views on Roosevelt's internal network. Comments floated in. Lol, Caleb, you're the best. Poor girl, but it's hilarious. A few odd comments slipped through. Feels kind of wrong to laugh at this. This isn't funny. But Caleb brushed those off quickly. Who cared? Most people were laughing. That night, Caleb slept soundly. He dreamed of standing in the middle of the school courtyard, microphone in hand, with everyone cheering his name. The hero, the loved one. He didn't know that across town in warm kitchens where parents checked the Roosevelt High parents chat group, a quiet storm was beginning to rise. Saturday morning. The sky was oddly clear after the heavy rain the night before. Caleb woke up late and lazily grabbed his phone to check notifications. Sending new messages in the group chat. 4 missed calls from Tyler. 3 messages from his mom. Still half asleep, Caleb opened the app. Within seconds, he jolted upright, heart pounding. The first message from Tyler. Take the video down now. The second, parents are going crazy in the group chat. The third, the principal. Caleb scrambled to open YouTube. The video was still there, but the dislikes had now outnumbered the like. The comment section had turned. This is bullying, not a joke. Disappointed that a popular student would act like this. If this were my kid, I'd sue the school. Some accounts tagged Roosevelt High's official page. Others messaged the local newspaper. The firestorm was no longer contained within the school. It was spreading silently and dangerously like an oil spill across the water. Caleb hurriedly deleted the video, but it was too late. In the living room, Mrs. Morrison sat stiffly in front of her laptop, face drawn tight with a kind of anger Caleb had never seen before. When Caleb stumbled downstairs, she didn't yell. She didn't scold. She simply looked at him with a cold, devastating disappointment. On her laptop screen was a screenshot of the video. Emily, head bowed, clutching her lunchbox. In headline, Roosevelt High student publicly bullied. How will the school respond? Caleb opened his mouth but couldn't make a sound. The worked out Jismice's voice was low and cold. Do you even understand what you've done? Sunday. Roosevelt High sent out an urgent email to all parents. Subject, urgent, school-wide meeting. Dear parents and students, in light of recent events impacting our school environment, we are holding an emergency assembly at 10 a.m. on Tuesday in the Roosevelt High auditorium. Attendance is mandatory for all students, parents, and faculty. Cards. Roosevelt High administration. Immediately, the school's internal social network exploded. Big trouble brewing. Everyone knows it's about that video. Rumor has it the district education board is sending reps. Caleb read the email, his heart pounding. He knew. There was no way to undo what had been set in motion. That night, dinner at the Morrison household was suffocating. Morrison, a prominent local real estate businessman who once proudly boasted, "My son is the future of Roosevelt High," now sat silent, his face dark and rigid with fury. Not furious because Caleb had done wrong, but Caleb had brought shame to the family. "You will stand up tomorrow," Mr. Morrison said tightly, "and you will apologize. No excuses, no more trouble." Mrs. Morrison said nothing. She simply laid a hand gently over Caleb's, a small final gesture, as if trying to salvage something fragile. Tuesday morning, Roosevelt High buzzed with a strange, charged energy. Students clustered in small groups, whispering nervously. Teachers wore dark clothing, their faces grim. Security staff stood in the hallways, monitoring every entrance. Caleb sat rigidly in the auditorium, hands clenched so tightly they turned white. His parents sat beside him, stiff and silent. On the stage, a simple podium had been set up. Behind it, a giant screen projected a single question. What will we choose, kindness or indifference? Principal Wilson stepped up to the podium. He swept his gaze across the packed auditorium, hundreds of students, teachers, parents. His voice was raspy but steady. "This morning," he began, "we are not here to assign blame. We are here to confront ourselves." He pressed a button. The giant screen lit up, but it didn't play Caleb's video. Instead, it played a montage full of crowds laughing at someone's expense. Shots of kids looking away as others were bullied. Snippets of cruel rumors are spreading through text messages. Secretly recorded moments of mockery. No background music. No flashy effects. Just raw and brutal reality. Rustling sounds filled the hall. Some students lowered their heads. Parents shifted uncomfortably, or two quietly wiped away tears. Caleb sat frozen, faces on the screen, included his own. Not just once, not just Emily. All the times Caleb had thought he was being harmless, now laid bare, like knives in the open. Principal Wilson lifted his gaze. "We have failed," he said. "Not just the children you see on this screen. We, as a community, They looked directly down at the front rows. And it's time for us to take responsibility. And the hall sank into a heavy silence. No applause, no jokes, just the sound of soft, broken breathing. Suddenly, the doors of the auditorium swung open. A gust of cold autumn air rushed in. All eyes turned to the back. A man entered, walking slowly but purposefully, like time itself moved around him. A faded denim jacket, worn leather boots, a cap pulled low, but the rugged, unmistakable face needed no introduction. Chuck Norris. Even the kids raised on TikTok memes recognized him. From the legends, the stories, the living man. Chuck walked straight to the stage without waiting for an invitation. Principal Wilson stepped aside. No microphone, no prepared speech. Just Chuck's warm, steady voice cutting cleanly through the air. There are battles, Chuck said, voice deep and resonant, where silence hurts more than any punch. The entire auditorium was still. Chuck turned his sharp gaze toward Caleb. The boy who had once been the school's pride was now a shrinking figure in the crowd. When someone vulnerable is hurt, Chuck said quietly, the blame isn't just on the one who strayed, so it's on the ones who stand by and watch. He scanned the whole room, eyes piercing, leaving no one untouched. I taught my granddaughter, Chuck continued, his voice softening, that sometimes to reveal the truth, you have to endure. You have to be silent. You have to believe that someday light will overcome darkness. He paused. Then his eyes shifted to the small corner of the auditorium where Emily sat. She lifted her head for the first time that morning. There was no bitterness in her gaze, no anger, only a strange, steady peace. Chuck nodded once. A quiet, almost imperceptible gesture of acknowledgement. He stepped down from the podium, walking toward Emily. Gently, he placed a hand on her shoulder. No grand speech, no dramatic declaration. But in that simple touch, the entire auditorium held its breath. No more explanations were needed. No more proof. Everyone understood.
Emily Norris. The girl mocked, isolated, belittled. She was Chuck Norris's own granddaughter, and her silence, her endurance, was not weakness. It was a strength deeper than any punch, louder than any shout, a strength that made the entire hall bow their heads in shame. Caleb felt like he was dissolving into the floor. Whispers buzzed through the rows. She's Chuck Norris's granddaughter. No wonder she didn't need to fight back. We were so wrong. Caleb's face burned. Cold sweat soaked his back. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his seat. There were no laughs now, no snickers. Only the heavy, unbearable weight of the truth. Chuck Norris didn't linger. He moved to the side of the stage, arms crossed, standing still like a silent guardian. All eyes turned toward Emily, the small girl, sitting upright, hands lightly clutching the edges of her old notebook. No one forced her. No one demanded it. But in the vast, aching silence, as if summoned by an invisible call, Emily rose. Her footsteps echoed across the auditorium floor, each step striking the heart of everyone watching. She stood at the microphone. He looked around. Her gaze was calm. No hatred. No drama. Just the quiet strength of someone who had endured and survived. She took a deep breath and spoke, her voice soft but unwavering. I knew, from the very first day I came here, that I would be different. Her voice floated across the silent hall. I chose silence. Not because I didn't know how to defend myself. Not because I was weak. She paused, letting the words settle. Her grey, droopy eyes swept over the audience, touching each soul. I stayed silent, because I wanted to see how many would choose kindness and how many would turn away. A quiet sob came from somewhere among the parents. Emily smiled faintly, not mockingly, but sadly. Bullying doesn't start with fists, she said. It starts with laughter, with indifferent glances, with silent complicity. She let the silence grow again, her words sinking into every heart. And, sometimes, to change a place, someone has to be willing to stand in the storm, to get hurt first. Her voice was steady, warmth, not accusing, not begging, simply truth. Emily bowed her head briefly, gathering courage, then lifted it again, her voice carrying farther. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Father. I'm not asking for anyone to fall at my feet and apologize. I only hope that from today onward, Roosevelt High becomes a place where kids like me don't have to stay silent anymore. A place where strength isn't measured by the loudest laughter, but by the courage to stand beside those who are alone. The auditorium exploded. Not with cheers, not with shouts, but with thunderous applause. Deep, sincere, overwhelming. Applause for awakening. Applause for gratitude. Applause for the quiet bravery that had brought an entire community face to face with itself. Caleb sat frozen. He didn't know when the tears started. Hot, burning tears. Not from humiliation, but finally understanding. Understanding how deeply his harmless fun had cut others. Chuck Norris smiled faintly. No more words were needed. The lesson Emily had just planted in that auditorium would echo for a long, long time after he was gone. The storm had passed through Roosevelt High. But it didn't just leave broken wounds behind. It left open spaces. Spaces where pride had shattered. Spaces where trust had cracked. And Caleb Morrison stood right in the middle of the wreckage he had helped create. No more admiring glances. No more friendly pats on the back. No more laughter welcoming him into every room. Oh boy, world vision. Only himself. And a choice. Run away. Or stay and rebuild, brick by brick. Caleb chose the second. At first it was unbearable. The early days of volunteering felt like being invisible. No one mocked him, but no one really saw him either. And he took the lowest tasks without complaint. Shelving heavy books in the dusty library, cleaning the cafeteria tables after lunch, guiding nervous new students to their classrooms. One day, Caleb noticed a small sixth grader, backpack clutched tightly to his chest, frozen in fear at the edge of the courtyard. Here, Caleb didn't say much. He simply slowed his steps, pointed the way, and offered a small, quiet smile. No flashy gestures. No fake friendliness. Just patience. Day by day, Caleb began learning lessons he had never cared to learn before. How to observe without invading someone's space. How to help without making someone feel smaller. How to slow down, listen, and not judge too quickly. Most importantly, how do you give without expecting anything back? One late afternoon, while reshelving books in the library, Caleb found an old notebook wedged between two shelves. Its leather cover was faded. Its pages were yellowed at the edges. When he opened it, a small piece of paper slipped out, landing softly at his feet. On it, written in simple, delicate handwriting, "Sometimes, just one person believing in you is enough to change your whole life." Caleb picked up the note with trembling fingers. He didn't need anyone to tell him. He knew. It was Emily. A private, quiet hope, tucked away where few would ever find it. A message for someone she would never meet, or, perhaps, for someone she already had. In that moment, Caleb understood. Redemption isn't loud. It doesn't come from dramatic speeches or grand gestures. It comes from living each day with quiet kindness, patient persistence, and a willingness to walk through the discomfort without needing applause. A few days later, Caleb gathered all his courage. He sat down and wrote a letter to Emily. It wasn't long. It didn't explain. He didn't defend. It was just honest. You don't owe me forgiveness, but I owe you gratitude, because you taught me that kindness is never weakness. He signed it simply, "Hey Caleb," folded it carefully and slipped it into Emily's locker. No expectation, no waiting for a reply, just sending it out into the world. Emily didn't respond immediately, but the next morning, when Caleb opened his own locker, he found a small object tucked inside. A slim, pale blue book titled 101 Ways to Make Your School a Better Place. No note, no name, but Caleb knew. He ran his fingers over the worn cover, feeling the dents and folds from frequent use. Inside, the pages were filled with small, simple actions. Smile at the person sitting next to you. Help someone pick up their dropped papers. Greet a teacher every morning. If you see someone sitting alone, sit quietly beside them. Listen more than you talk. None of it was dramatic. None of it is world-changing by itself. But Caleb understood. Tiny things, done enough times, could change a whole world. Even a world as messy and broken as Roosevelt High. That night, Caleb sat alone in his room. His phone lay untouched on his desk. No texts, no notifications, no applause, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel lonely. In the stillness, a quiet feeling bloomed inside him. Peace. Not the kind that comes from being liked, not the kind that comes from being cheered, but the kind that comes from knowing he was finally becoming someone he could respect. In the days that followed, Caleb kept changing, not for praise, not because someone told him to, but because he knew this was the person he was supposed to be all along. Helping the old librarian lift heavy crates without being asked. Shooting hoops with a wheelchair-bound kid during free periods. Showing a new immigrant student how to find her next class. No cameras. No live streams. No likes. Just quiet, steady work. Just doing what was right. One Friday afternoon, while Caleb was hanging posters for the Welcome New Students program, someone quietly placed a blue marker beside him. Caleb looked up. It was EMA. She said nothing. Gus nodded once, a small, nearly invisible smile brushing her lips. For Caleb, that small gesture meant more than any standing ovation. It was acknowledgement. It was a beginning. From that day on, there was no dramatic friendship between Caleb and Emily. No movies moment hugs. No tearful speeches of forgiveness. Just something simple, something real. A small nod when they passed each other in the hallways. A faint smile while waiting in the lunch line. A quiet glance of acknowledgement during volunteer events. Tiny gestures, barely noticeable to anyone else. But in a world where even a look, a word, a breath used to be weapons, this quiet peace between them was a revolution. As autumn deepened, Roosevelt High slowly started to heal. On the surface, things didn't change overnight. Kids still joked, still gossiped, still stumbled and made mistakes. But beneath it, something had shifted. Small acts of kindness began popping up like stubborn green shoots through cracked concrete. Someone paused to help a dropped backpack. A shy new student is being invited to sit at a full lunch table. The teacher noticed when a quiet kid needed an extra moment to speak up. Emily remained much the same. Quiet, self-contained, often scribbling in her notebook during lunch breaks. But she was no longer alone. Every nod, every small smile she received was proof. Her endurance had planted seeds that others had finally learnt to water. Chuck Norris watched all this from a distance. At school events he'd stand off to the side, arms crossed, denim jacket faded from years of sun and rain, boots worn at the heels. He didn't need to interfere. He didn't need to make speeches. He had already fought his battles long ago. Now, it was enough to watch these kids, this new generation, who learned to fight theirs in a different way, with kindness, with patience, with courage. And Chuck, he smiled, not the wide, showy grin from action movie posters, but a small, rare smile, a smile that said, it was worth it. One soft late autumn afternoon, Roosevelt High held its annual welcome day for new students. No flashy banners, no expensive decorations, just warm greetings, homemade pastries, cups of hot cider and cocoa. Teachers are wearing sweaters and students are helping string up colorful balloons. Caleb had been working since early morning, setting up chairs, taping signs to the gym doors, making sure the courtyard was clean and welcoming. No one asked him to. No one even paid him much attention. And for the first time in his life, Caleb didn't care. He wasn't doing it to be noticed. He was doing it because he wanted Roosevelt High to be better than before. Because he owed it, not just to Emily but to himself. Late in the afternoon, when everything was set up, Caleb found a quiet corner of the courtyard and sat down to rest. The autumn breeze carried the smell of fresh grass and baked bread from the cafeteria. Somewhere in the distance, kids laughed, feet thudding lightly against the tiled floors. Caleb closed his eyes. He listened, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged. Not as a golden boy, not as a fallen star, just as himself. Ordinary, steady, trying. A soft footstep made him open his eyes. Standing in front of him was Emily. She wore the same grey hoodie, slightly too big, sleeves tugged over her hands. Her hair framed her face gently, catching the last pinkish rays of the sunset. In her hands, she held a small cup of juice. Without a word, she held it out to him. No speed, no grand forgiveness. Just a simple, silent offering. Caleb took it with both hands. He smiled, a small, real smile, unforced, genuine. Emily smiled back, just a flicker, before turning and walking away, her figure blending into the soft light of the evening. That tiny, perfect moment they both understood. There were no debts left between them, no apologies owed, no forgiveness demanded. Deux absents, de two people, both broken once, both learning to heal, finally standing on even ground. Off to the side, under the wide arms of an old maple tree, stood Chuck Norris. He didn't approach, or it said, didn't call out. He simply watched, arms folded, eyes bright with a quiet pride that words couldn't capture. Not pride for fame, not pride for victories won in arenas long past, but pride for something far rarer, far harder. The victory of kindness, the victory of quiet courage. Nothing at all. The victory of a new generation finding their way, not with fists, but with open hands. The sun dipped low, staining the sky in soft pink and gold. Leaves rustled gently along the pathways, carrying the sound of distant laughter. The old halls of Roosevelt High glowed warmly in the dusk. Somewhere in those halls, a hand reached out to help another. Lonely kid found a place to sit. A small voice spoke up, no longer afraid. And through it all, kindness, quiet, patient, persistent, kept moving forward, one small act at a time. The next day, The sun rose over Roosevelt High, just like always. The maple leaves swirled in the morning breeze. The hallways echoed with chatter and footsteps and the clatter of locker doors. Life moved forward, messy, imperfect, full of little victories and little mistakes. But something had changed. Something lasting. That year, when people looked back on Roosevelt High, they didn't remember the flashy pep rallies. They didn't remember the wild basketball games or the sparkling homecoming dance. They remembered the quiet revolution, the way a small girl with a faded hoodie taught an entire school that silence could be stronger than shouting. The way a boy who once craved applause learned to live for something deeper than being liked. The way kindness, tiny, stubborn kindness, began threading its way through the cracks. Caleb Morrison never returned to being the golden boy. He didn't want to. Instead, he found a new place for himself among the quiet workers who cleaned up after events without being asked, among the volunteers who ran tutoring sessions for struggling kids, among the soft smiles and gentle nods that said, "I see you. I'm glad you're here." He became exactly the kind of person he once would have overlooked. And he was proud of that. Emily Norris remained much the same. Quiet, observant, kind, but not showy. She still wrote in her notebook. She still preferred corners to spotlights. But when she walked through the halls now, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't pitied. She wasn't mocked. She was respected. Because everyone knew it was her strength, her patience, her belief in better that had cracked the ice around their hearts. And Chuck Norris? He remained a silent sentinel, watching, guarding, believing, not because he thought the battle was over, but because he knew the seeds had been planted. The roots were growing, deep and unseen, ready to hold strong when storms came again. And that was enough. Some wounds never disappear completely. They leave faint scars, invisible but real. But Roosevelt High learned that even the deepest wounds can heal, that even the worst mistakes can lead to growth, that even the quietest acts of courage can echo longer than the loudest victories. Somewhere in the quiet corners of the library, in the bright gym filled with laughter, in the sunlit cafeteria where new kids found welcoming smiles, a truth lived on. Kindness matters, even when no one sees it, especially when no one sees it. And deep inside every student, every teacher, every parent who lived through that season, a quiet lesson took root. Inside each of us live two wolves, once full of anger, pride and resentment, the other full of compassion, forgiveness and courage. Which wolf wins? The one we choose to feed. And on that soft autumn evening, under the fading pink sky of Roosevelt High, one thing was clear. The side they chose right. The end.